Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil Revelations, Infernal difficulty, no damage, no bonus items walkthrough. This is episode 6, Cat and Mouse, and it starts off very strong, because we're playing as Chris in this part, and of course the past sections of Resident Evil Revelations are good, because your weapons are actually reliable, and you're not being so over-reliant upon RPG designs, and Chris actually plays really well in this whole entire sequence, compared to how he is in Resident Evil Village, that's for sure. The Chris you played as in Resident Evil Village was not Chris Redfield at all. He was some inferior version of Ethan Winters. He felt more like Carlos with his dialogue, and he played like absolute garbage, and he was nowhere near as good as himself from Resident Evil 7 in the Not a Hero DLC. This version of Chris in Revelations is much better than the Chris Redfield that we play as in Resident Evil Village. That is for sure. And it took some practice to actually get the proper path down, but I managed to get it done in the end, and you do not have to kill any of the enemies here. You can just run right past them, obviously, because it's a survival horror game, and of course you have to know when to kill and when not to kill. Even if this wasn't a survival horror game, knowing when to kill and when not to kill is always important, because dragging out scenarios unnecessarily just leads to the gameplay being absolutely repetitive, stagnant, and boring. And the people who embrace such runs like kill all runs are just hollow individuals who can't find any kind of satisfaction in life, knowing them they're probably the most impotent of individuals. If you think such an empty experience that just makes the gameplay look so stupid, that just goes against what the developers established with this game, that goes against the very pacing of the game, is anything to find some sort of fun from. Like, that's really all I have to say about that. But we're past that section, and we're still getting some supplies. There are some grenades scattered around the environment. You'll definitely need them for the upcoming sequence where you're in the casino and you're dealing with those skag dead. You'll notice that I've put a lot more edits this time around, because you've already been through these areas. And pretty much episode 6, you're going to understand exactly where to go. Not only will the waypoint be very helpful, but you've already treaded through this environment before. And here's the casino area, so you need 3 grenades for this sequence, or 4 grenades. You can get a 4th grenade from the area where those ooze were previously, but I didn't see the need. And 3 grenades should be enough to kill these double-bladed ooze, also known as pincer ooze in this game. And now that they're dead, or rather that guy is still alive because he's still hanging on by the skin of his teeth, but we'll put him out of his misery. And we now have the skag dead, and the skag dead are easy, and Jessica is actually helpful in this part because she's using a sniper rifle, and the sniper rifle does a lot of damage to these enemies, and it does a lot of stun damage against them. And whenever you get the opportunity, do a melee attack, and given that we're not dealing with any RPG designs, the melee and the weapons will actually feel very useful, so there's actual incentive to go for them, compared to what you'd be getting when you're playing as Jill. And I'm going to actually try to use my knife on the second skag dead. I'm fully confident in my ability to dodge the skag dead's instant kill attack. One thing I don't really like about the skag dead is its chainsaw attack. The 3-hit chainsaw attack cannot be dodged, and there's no telling when they choose to do it. I mean, when you're looping their instant kill grab, they never do it, but if you're standing in a weird way, or they turn around and they're a little delayed in trying to initiate an attack, they're very likely to do the chainsaw attack, and the chainsaw attack, it gives them so much range, and running away from it is physically impossible. I mean, there are times when you can safely run past the first hit of the chainsaw combo, but you need to get away afterwards, and getting that angle right is a little tricky. But they're dead, and I didn't have to use my knife because Jessica killed that one very quickly. There's a couple more grenades, and then we have a couple more ooze coming up right over here. Just use the shotgun for this part right here. The shotgun's really good against these enemies because you're not being hindered by the RPG designs, so this actually feels like a very powerful shotgun. It kills them in about 2 hits, and the stun's pretty decent against them. It's such a shame it doesn't knock them over. I can't imagine why they would remove the knockback capability for the shotgun against these enemies. You don't remove the knockback on the hunters, yet you remove the knockback on the ooze. That doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, it could be because their flesh just absorbs the bullets a little bit better, but, I mean, they're taking damage, and, you know, you're already making them flail by hitting their arms, and also with their legs. I mean, the legs, you don't really notice a stun that much, but with the arms, you do notice a stun. So, and I mean, like, you've already been able to knock over other things in the Resident Evil games with a very similar physiology to these enemies. So why the shotgun doesn't knock over these enemies, I don't know. But that is just probably one of the main things that they had to sacrifice when favoring the RPG designs of this game, and also with the way the ammunition is handled in this game. Although technically in Revelations 2, the RPG designs and the way the ammunition is handled is very similar to Revelations 1. but the shotgun can actually knock over the Afflicted, and the Afflicted are the enemies that you encounter in Claire's section of the main game. So somewhere between Revelations 1 and Revelations 2, the developers had a change in mindset when deciding whether to include the knockback capability on the shotgun for the enemies in Revelations 2. And I guess one of the main reasons for that was because the Afflicted were a lot faster than the normal ooze in Revelations 1. So maybe as a show of pity towards the normal ooze, they made it where the ooze cannot be knocked over by the shotgun. And at least Revelations 1 does have some fast enemies that can be knocked over by the shotgun, like with the Fenrirs and also with the Hunters. But really, the whole tenet of a shotgun being able to knock over enemies and dealing a high amount of damage, it should be universal between all Resident Evil games, but this one, it isn't really the case. And the fact that the customization kits play such a gamey role in actually dictating the effectiveness of the weapons, it's kind of silly in that aspect, and it just makes you not really appreciate the effectiveness of your weapons unless you have the customization kits attached to somehow make them the weapons that they should have been if the customization kits didn't exist. But that's very confusing to contemplate. But we're now on this part right here, so it's easy. You just need to have the pulse grenades right over here, and then you need to use the iframes of your melee in order to bypass the chunk ooze, which is going to blow up right now. You then need to hug the left-hand side when you get past these ooze right here, and somehow Jessica gets in front of me. How did that happen? I've never seen that happen before, where Jessica gets in front of you. I don't know why she teleported, but that was very odd. And at least I wasn't delayed in getting through the door too much to cause that other ooze that was behind me to actually come after me. And right here, I use a grenade alongside my pulse grenade because I had a moment where I used the pulse grenade and one of the ooze wasn't stunned by the pulse grenade, which is very bullshit. So that's why I had to ensure that all those ooze were dead. And now we have the swimming sections of Revelations 1. And the swimming on this game, it controls really well. I mean, I don't know if it's better than Uncharted 4's swimming or not, but it feels good to handle. And when you have these sea creepers in the water and they're trying to grab onto you, they don't do any damage to you, which is really good design. Instead, they drain your oxygen rapidly. I mean, even still, though, the oxygen is pretty lenient, which I'm glad, because having to deal with something like that in this kind of game, it would really hinder the experience a lot and would just lead to a lot of frustration. But all you need to do is just find 2 pipes and just use them on this grate over here. I'm really glad that Chris is not saving Jill from this case. Jill is actually handling this herself, because it shows that the characters are actually a lot better than their older Resident Evil counterparts. Like, in the old games, there would always be, like, lucky pass moments that allowed the characters to just get away from seemingly inescapable situations where if another protagonist didn't conveniently show up at that moment, that character would be dead. Like, everyone remembers that scene from Resident Evil 1 Remake where the ceiling is coming down and Jill is about to be squished, and then Barry is just conveniently there. Like, that right there is a great example of a lucky pass moment. And I've already talked a lot about lucky pass moments in games like Outlast, for instance, but in those kind of horror simulator games where you can't fight back, a lot of people will assume that generates a lot of horror, but it doesn't. If you can't fight back, then the game is conveniently set up in a way where the enemies are never really a threat. And considering that you're on the enemy's turf, you'd expect the main character to fall into a lot of traps or have so many enemies just coming after them. But there's always like a vent that's open, there's always like a hole in the wall or like something like that that just allows the main character to get away, or like the enemies never bother carrying keys on them or anything. Like, everything is just set up in a way where it's just so easy to get away from them, and it just makes you not respect the lethality of the enemies. And you know, in games like Resident Evil or Dead Space, where you're actually able to fight back, they put in those kind of scenarios where you can't seemingly run away. Like, look at that subway scene from Dead Space 2, where you fall down from that train car, and then Isaac is just hanging by his leg, and he's upside down, and he has to survive against those necromorphs. Like, you don't see such sequences like that in horror simulator games or anything like that. And, you know, you have these kind of moments in Resident Evil 4 and onward where the main character can't simply run away. They have to deal with the enemies or find some way to disable traps. And you don't really get those kind of moments in the older Resident Evil games unless it's set up in a way that just looks very comical. So the fact that Jill was able to get out of that entire underwater section without Chris's aid is really good, because it really showcases her development as a Resident Evil character. But right now, after handling those enemies, I'm going to go all the way up to the top floor of the main hall, and I'm going to come back over here because the filtration system has cleansed the water, and I'll be able to get the supplies that are over here. And I need a lot of sniper rifle ammo because we're going to have a boss fight later on in episode 6, and the boss fight is absolutely horrendous. It's a boss fight against Drahignazo, and Drahignazo is a boss that is designed to charge at you, but he has some other attacks that are very bullshit. And he isn't so bullshit in the first phase because he only does one attack and you can just run right past him. But in the second phase, he gains access to a slam move that knocks you over, and it doesn't really do that much damage. But on normal difficulty, you could shoot his arm and cause him to collapse, but you can't do that on Infernal difficulty. They've removed that system on Infernal difficulty. Why? You've removed such a basic element to a move like that that is just impossible to avoid unless you get so far away from it. And you're giving the player the opportunity to do something very skillful, and you want to remove that on a higher difficulty? And even though the move barely does any damage, it's annoying because you're stuck on the ground, and Jill is so delayed in getting off the ground because you have to mash X and you have to wait for the prompt to appear. And during that time, Drahignazo can charge at you, and the only point you'll ever get iframes is when you're rising up off the ground, but Jill takes too long, and it's so bullshit. And it's all because you were getting screwed by a move that has infinite range, it feels like, and the developers have removed a fundamental ability to get past that move. And I need to pause in this tangent right now because this is a gimmick fight right here where we need to stop Drahignazo from killing us in this elevator. And if you don't have the sniper rifle for this part, you'll never deal enough damage to stun this guy. The sniper rifle is the only weapon that can actually stop this guy. And also, there's another stupid design in place where the 5th time Drahignazo attacks you in this elevator, he attacks you way too fast. And he attacks you so fast that you don't have enough time to hit this guy with the sniper rifle before he hits you. And the only possible way to avoid it is to use a BOW decoy, shoot the BOW decoy the moment Drahignazo tries to attack, and use the iframes of the explosion to your advantage to bypass the attack. If you're having to rely upon such a gaming system like that, and it just feels so mandatory and just so forceful, that it just shows this part is badly designed. Look at it, right here. I use the BOW decoy, and I bypass that move. And also, the points where Drahignazo attacks you, it's random. So you need to be on your guard at all times. And also, randomly on the 4th hit, I believe, or sometimes on the 3rd hit, he can choose to attack a little bit faster, so you gotta be very fast. And this last part right here, it'll take roughly 3 hits from your sniper rifle to get rid of this guy. The boss fight will begin shortly, but you can take the time to scour the area for supplies as long as you hug the outside edge of this arena. And also, the checkpoint I just got right over here, this checkpoint right here, you can actually loop this checkpoint. So if you go back near the elevator and then move back towards the checkpoint, you'll trigger the checkpoint again. So you can skip having to pick up all this ammunition again if you fail in this boss fight. And it's very easy to fail because of how shit this boss fight is designed. And continuing my tangent on this boss, the 3rd phase is very bullshit. Because on the 3rd phase, he gains access to different varieties of the same charge attack move. There's one where he doesn't do any kind of startup animation, he just immediately charges at you. And so you have to be on your toes at all times, and at times it comes out so quickly that the dodge just doesn't have time to register. There's also another one where he does the same startup animation, but instead of doing a full-on charge, he stops for a bit and then he does a very slow charge. That one is fine, but then the moves I've just listed, he recovers very fast after those animations, but when he does the normal charge in the 3rd phase, he gains a lot of recovery, so you at least have time to shoot his weak spot, which is his head, and the head is behind him. But this is the fight right now, and watch this, by the way. You see that? There are 2 gas canisters in this room right here, and when Drahignazo charges into those, it should always stun him, but it doesn't. There are times when he can charge into those gas canisters and he will not be stunned. You see that just then? He did not get stunned by the gas canister. And this got me screwed, and I had to restart this fight once because of the fact that he didn't get stunned by the gas canister. Why is it that after so many Resident Evil games, they suddenly have this whole problem where gas canisters can't stun this guy? And this same problem is also in Resident Evil 3 Remake when dealing with Nemesis, whenever you were out on the streets of Raccoon City, because there were times when the explosive barrels could not stun Nemesis, and because of that you were forced to use a grenade, then use the explosive barrel to actually stun Nemesis, which is so stupid. And this right here, this is the 3rd phase. You see how he just transitions between each of the phases without warning? That is also another problem with this boss. You will be doing so much damage to him, and then he turns around to try to attack you, and he just immediately charges at you. because he doesn't give any warning that he's transitioned between the phases. And the same also applies to the second phase. When he transitions from the first phase to the second phase, he does not give any warning. Instead, what happens is he'll raise his arm to try to slam you, and you're already close to him by then, so you have no way of stopping him. You have no way of knowing that the second phase has started, so he gets a free hit on you because of very poor feedback on the developer's part. And the only possible way to deal with this guy is to damage race him, and that is why the sniper rifle is needed. The sniper rifle is needed because of its high damage, and it's the one weapon that is actually good at stunning him because of the high damage it deals to him. Every other weapon just isn't very good at dealing with this guy, and damage racing him is so much better than putting up with his moves and trying to rely upon a dodge system that at times can be hit and miss. And you might have noticed that I was backing up, and I was able to initiate a quick turn dodge in the process. That is something that I specified in an earlier video. But you can actually initiate a dodge while strafing and while backing up, but this is really the only fight in the game where initiating a dodge while backing up is better than doing anything else. This right here, I'm trying to make sure that I have some pistol ammo in here. If there is any excess ammunition deposits within this room, try to use it to refill any weapons that need ammunition. That's what I did for the pistol just then. There's the Veltro keycard. You can use that keycard to gain access to other side areas within the ship. But I don't think I'm going to go for them because in my pistol-only run, I skipped out on a lot of the Veltro keycard customization kits because the attachments that I have for my pistol, like the very early game attachments, are very useful for most of this game. So there wasn't really a need to go for those customization kits. I mean, you can choose to go for them if you want to, but I don't think it's necessary, and I think this will probably be the case for this walkthrough, where I won't be going for them, and all you have to do is do this puzzle, and here is a blooper just then, like, watch this bullshit. Look, why did he not get stunned? And I take damage in the process. It is so bullshit. It makes no sense how they could mess up something like this. And at least they learned their lesson in Resident Evil Village. At least the explosive barrels were a lot more consistent. Were they damaging? No, because you had to use 2 explosive barrels to get rid of Lycans on Village of Shadows difficulty. So they made the reliability of the explosive barrels good, but for a utility purpose, they were not very good at dealing a lot of damage. And you barely got to use explosive barrels anyway on Resident Evil Village because that game is just lacking in so many things, and it just introduced mechanics that seemed like they were going to serve a greater purpose in the game, but they actually weren't, like with the barricades and with the flower bags. What a false tease, and it's absolutely disgraceful that they didn't do more with the gameplay in Resident Evil Village, but that's all I'll say on that. This is the end of this episode. Stay tuned for the future episodes. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.